Hi, I'm Peggy Farron, and you're watching the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to talk about bird photography for conservation with Shawn Carey. But first, remember to sign up for some of the freebies on our website. It's understandphotography.com. And by the way, I am very sensitive about the name of my company. It's Understand, like a command. Understandphotography.com. There is no ing. I don't know why everybody adds digits to the name of my company. Anyway, we have some free things on the website. Right on the front page, it'll say click here for freebies. We have like essential travel photography tips that Joe Fitzpatrick put together. They are so helpful if you're traveling with your camera gear. What camera do I buy? Just today, I had 2 people call and say, hey, I'm interested in photography. I don't even have a camera yet. What should I buy? So I made a little video on what I recommend for a good starter camera. There's also a video on there on what do you need to learn? Okay, you want to become a photographer, what do you need to learn? Because most photographers try to piecemeal their education without having a plan. If you have a plan, you're going to learn a lot more quickly. And then the most recent thing we put together for the holiday season is 30 unique and practical gifts for photographers. So understandphotography.com. Go ahead and download or watch one of the videos or something. Please like our Facebook page, join our Facebook group, make comments on our YouTube. The thing that can help us the most is to give us a review on the podcast. You can go right and do a review on any way you listen to your podcast, but of course iTunes is the big one. If you give us a good review, it really, really helps us come up in the search engines. And again, it's the Understand Photography Show. So anyway, Shawn Carey is my guest today, and he's been teaching wildlife photography for Massachusetts Audubon. Mass Audubon. I'm like, what's Mass Audubon? Massachusetts. Anyway, he's been teaching for 18 years. He's the co-founder of Migration Productions, so we're going to talk about that. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you for having me.
And you've been talking all day, right?
Yep, we just gave a Lightroom talk earlier today, and that went great. Had a nice audience there. I guess it was one of the bigger groups they said they've had in a while, and got a lot of new members, so that was good.
Yeah, January is the best. You got here on the best month, and it is the busiest month of the year for us.
Worked out great.
Now, how did you get into bird photography?
I always had an interest in the natural world, and I was interested in a birder or bird watcher before I was a bird photographer.
Okay.
And so the interest of birding and watching birds and observing birds in the natural world, I also subsequently had an interest in photography and just kind of melded the two together at one point. And as these things go or happen, you get a little more serious and you buy one piece of equipment and then another piece of equipment, and before you know it, you're kind of really serious about it. In my case, I was. It just was a natural progression to the point where I became very interested in it and did a lot more wildlife, nature, bird photography. I still consider myself a birder or a bird watcher, but I do a lot of my bird photography and nature photography kind of at the same time now.
Yeah, well, if that's what you love.
Yeah, I love it.
You know, I'm not that interested in photographing birds, but I can see it coming because I watch, you know, I have so many friends who are into bird photography, but then a few months ago I got a bird feeder.
That's the start.
And now I'm starting to get into it. Now I have a second bird feeder because I put the
slippery slope.
I know. I got one for Christmas that is kind of like a cage, but it's pretty with the bird seat inside, so only the tiny little birds can get in there.
And the squirrels can't get to it. Keeps the squirrels away as well. I haven't had a
problem with squirrels yet.
Well, the cage will keep the squirrels away.
What I mostly have a problem with are doves. I'm sorry, but doves are boring.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, but in the one that's right outside my window, the cage one, it's just the painted buntings.
Oh, nice.
Oh my gosh.
There's actually a painted bunting in Massachusetts right now. It's all a buzz. We don't get that bird up there in Massachusetts, hardly. I've only ever seen one.
Oh my.
And it's at a bird feeder somewhere outside of Boston. The bird has appeared since I got down here, so when I get back up there, I'll have to go see if it's still hanging around and check it out.
So exciting. I mean, Mrs. Painted Bunting comes a lot more than Mr.
Yes.
And I don't know if she's just hungry or what, you know?
That's great.
Because when she first started coming, I'm thinking, I wonder what kind of bird that is. I had no idea, and then he showed up, and I realized she was the female.
That's a star bird.
So now I'm getting very into it.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent.
That's how it starts,
That's
just
how
with
it
the
starts.
photography.
That's
You start
right.
with one little camera, and all of a sudden you got
Pair of binoculars.
$20,000 worth of equipment or
That's
more.
right. Yep.
Now, how did you become connected with the Audubon Society?
So, for me, I had, oh God, this is probably back in the late 80s. A company that I was working for just west of Boston was not too far from one of the Audubon sanctuaries and actually from the headquarters for Massachusetts Audubon. And they actually came to our company looking for some help with some display material they were going to do for an event. And kind of one thing led to another, and I made an initial connection. And from that connection, you just meet people and you meet people and so on and so forth. And it's just kind of evolved over the course of many years to the point now where individual Audubon sanctuaries within the state I have kind of very good connections with, and some of them I teach for, others I don't, but I still have the connections, and I help fundraise for them and so forth, and I'm on the advisory council statewide for the Massachusetts Audubon, and then one of the actual sanctuaries, the Museum of American Bird Art, which is the only sanctuary within the Mass Audubon structure that is dedicated to the arts in terms of birds.
And when arts, what do you mean
Well,
by that?
Photography, painting, sculptor, bird carvings, all this sort of thing. So they actually have a gallery there that they have ongoing displays and openings and so forth. So I'm on the advisory council for that individual sanctuary as well, and do some teaching for them and so forth. So it's just it's been something that's evolved over the years, and to the point where I believe in what Mass Audubon is doing in terms of their mission in conservation, in the protection, not just of birds, but in wildlife in general, which I think we need more of, personally. And they do good work, and it works very well, and to the point now where, there's certain things that will come up that I will get phone calls from the contacts that I have looking for help from me, from some of my expertise in photography and videography and that sort of thing. So it's worked out quite well, actually.
Is Audubon just birds, though?
No, it's,
Audubon is...
Yeah, Massachusetts Audubon, it's
conservation
conservation
company.
of everything. Yeah, so
the mission is conservation of wildlife in general? Is
well,
that the mission of Audubon?
of protection of land, because without the land, you can't protect the animals and the birds that are on them, of course.
Yeah.
And each individual sanctuary is, dotted throughout the state. Just as an example, the Wellfleet Bay Sanctuary in Cape Cod is right along Cape Cod Bay. And if you go inland to, say, Drumlin Farm, you're actually on a farm.
And that's also an Audubon.
And that's an Audubon sanctuary as well. So they're dotted throughout the state.
Here we have Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, that's an Audubon.
Right, that's National Audubon.
That's
so
national.
Massachusetts Audubon is an independent Audubon. They are not affiliated with the National Audubon, which some people think all Audubons are the same, and they are not. Nothing against National Audubon.
Right.
They do great work as well. But Massachusetts Audubon is its own entity. It's its own
So here
Audubon.
we have, so we have Audubon, like Corkscrew is national.
That's all, anything in the state of Florida is all affiliated with National Audubon.
So even though we have smaller, like we have Audubon of the Western Everglades.
They're all affiliated
That's
back with
affiliated
National.
back with National.
Yes, exactly.
Or
And I don't have
Mass-
any affiliation with National Audubon.
Mass Audubon is just Massachusetts.
Just Massachusetts,
But
exactly.
Massachusetts has got a lot of people.
It's actually the first Audubon as well.
Oh.
Massachusetts Audubon is the
And
oldest.
where was he from? That was his name, right?
It was John James Audubon.
Where was he
named
from?
after. I think he was actually French Audubon, right? But I think he was originally, I don't know.
I know he had a home in Key West that's on the tour, if
That's
you go to Key
kind of
West.
part of it. Yeah. But they basically have adopted his name as for Audubon. So yeah. But the thing about Massachusetts Audubon in particular, and a lot of the protection of the birds, is actually from a lot of women that started that years ago. Not necessarily the men. The women are always kind of in the forefront, believe it or not. And in the case with Mass Audubon, that's the same thing. It was women that took the charge, to help kind of start that up, and with the protection of a lot of the birds that we, particularly here in Florida, with the herons and egrets and that sort of thing, with the migratory bird treaty yak and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what is Migration Productions? Is that, you
So-
said that's a company you started?
Yeah, so Migration Productions is a production company that myself and my business partner Jim Grady started many years ago. So this company I was saying that I worked for, that we initially got the contact with Mass Audubon. He and I worked at the same company. We were both doing corporate work. When you're doing corporate work, you're always looking for your creative outlet. And our creative outlet was we wanted to produce these whether they were multi-image slideshows back in the day. This is before digital, right? That evolved into doing documentary videos, and then the digital photography, teaching workshops for Mass Audubon, and so forth. So the production company that we have is all of the productions that my business partner Jim and I work on, and we just finished our latest documentary within the last couple months, which we're very excited to have.
What's the name of it?
It's called A Wing and a Care.
A Wing and a Care.
Yep.
Okay.
And we picked 3 individuals and the bird species that those 3 people are looking to protect, so to speak. So we did the first part on a gentleman named Norman Smith. And Norman Smith started the Snowy Owl Project in Boston. Or
I would
just
love
outside.
to see one of the...
They're gorgeous.
My problem with them is they like the cold.
They do, although a few years ago in the eruptive year when all these snowy owls were showing up, one actually made it to Florida, to Jacksonville.
Wow.
That was 4 years ago. So we did Norman Smith, and Norman's been doing his Snowy Owl Project now for, I think, over 30 years. And one of the things that he has a state and federal license, and he can go on to Logan Airport in Boston, and he traps the snowy owls off of the airport and then takes these owls and relocates them so that they're not in danger of flying into planes, or the more of a concern is them chasing other birds that then would fly into planes.
Okay.
So we did the whole story on Norman and what he's been doing for snowy owls.
Oh, wow.
And then we picked Dr. Stephen Kress, who a lot of people may have heard of. He started the Project Puffin up in Maine, which is affiliated with National Audubon.
Okay.
And he worked, same thing, about 30 years or so, maybe a little bit more now, on reintroducing the Atlantic puffin off the coast of Maine, initially onto Eastern Egg Rock. And so we tell the whole story, and we interviewed Dr. Kress out on Eastern Egg Rock. And he tells the story of how they first brought the first group of young puffins there and how that went on for many years until it became the success that it is now. And the fact that people are now seeing, these puffins that were extirpated, they were removed from that area, they were no longer in the wild there, and they've been reintroduced, and they're working to continue to help protect and hopefully increase the numbers of Atlantic puffins. And it's a very fascinating story, and there's several books out there. Derek Jackson actually has a book he published a few years ago. He writes for the Boston Globe and did a whole interview and so forth with Dr. Kress, and really fascinating story. So we tell that story. And then the third person is a friend of mine named Tom Sayers, who lives in Connecticut. He's a retired school teacher, and Tom started a kestrel box program. So kestrel is the smallest falcon in North America, and you have them in Florida this time of year. A lot of the birds that we have up north that fledge and so forth, when it's time to migrate in the fall, they head south, and a lot of them end up in Florida. And Tom, in his area of Connecticut, which is just north of Hartford, has up, I don't know how many boxes he has up now. Might be even close to 100 boxes. I don't know what it is, 70, 80, 90 boxes. These like if you think of a bird box, that birds. So it's a kestrel box. It's a little bit bigger. It's designed specifically for kestrels. And these kestrels will take these boxes and, in theory, nest in them. And so Tom has basically found appropriate habitat that he thinks the box can go in. So he approaches a landowner. If you were one of the landowners, he would say, hey, I see you have this nice piece of land. I'd like to put this kestrel box up on your piece of property. And he's only ever had one person turn him down. It's because they had bluebirds on their property and they were afraid the kestrels were going to eat the bluebirds.
And I don't
That's
blame
kind of
them.
understandable.
I like bluebirds too.
So, exactly. So he places these kestrel boxes up, and last year he fledged 175 kestrels. And to date, and he told me the number, and I should remember it, I want to say it's well over 1,000 birds that he's banned, adults and fledglings, but I think he's fledged over 800 birds now in the course of his program. So it's a lot of kestrel, and kestrel numbers have been in a steep decline in terms of their numbers. They've been going down pretty dramatically, but Tom has been able to identify locations for these nest boxes, and it's been very successful.
Wow.
Yeah, very successful.
So you did a whole documentary on
did a whole
him,
documentary,
and
yeah.
did interviews, and did you cinematography type of
Yep.
photography where you have
We
these
actually-
beautiful birds?
Yeah, we
in
did a lot
your-
of video. We actually, with Tom's section, we actually retrofitted one of the kestrel boxes, cut out a hole and put another box and mounted a GoPro camera so we could get footage inside the box.
Wow.
So maybe I can give you a clip of that if you want to share that with
Oh
you.
my gosh, that would be
Yeah.
wonderful. We'll put that in the show notes,
Sure.
understandphotography.com.
Yep. So we have this video footage inside the kestrel box. You can see the baby kestrels when they're very young, and so they
So it's facing in, so
looking
it's not
inside the
backlit.
box. Nope, looking right in the box.
You're
And then we
using the
had
light.
face another one that we put on the outside of the box, so the adults come into the box. You could see them as they approach the box. So we got some really interesting stuff.
Now,
And,
how long did you do that for? Did you?
these projects can take many years because you need multiple seasons to get the footage you need and so forth. This
Yeah.
particular project took us just a little over 4 years to complete.
4 years.
Yeah.
Boy, you're a patient man.
You have to be very patient when you do this. So, yeah. But it's a real joy to finish it and share it with people and so forth. And for this, and we've done several other video projects. This is the most recent. We did another one prior to that on shorebirds, another one prior to that on hawk watching. We did one for the American Birding Association on the Birds Exchange program many years ago. Actually did a Spanish version of that as well. So we're constantly looking for projects. We have actually another project, even though this most recent one just finished. For the last 4 years, we've been working on another project on loons.
Okay.
On common loons. They're reintroducing common loons to eastern Massachusetts, and we've been documenting that. So that's going to be a 7 or 8 year project until it's finished for that one.
Now,
Yeah.
are you compensated for all of this?
So we self-fund all our own projects, and then the finished products when we are completed, and we take them out to the public, and in many cases we're showing them at birding festivals and birding events and conferences and bird clubs, much like the camera club sort of situation and so forth. People are paying you to come in and kind of show the content and so forth for that. And then with the shorebird video and the hawkwatch video, we did DVDs, and had a whole package for that, and people could buy the DVD and so forth. And then for the workshops I teach for Massachusetts Audubon, I don't do those for free. I get compensated and paid to teach those.
But it sounds like your documentaries, you really don't make money at. It's more for.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more for the love of it. We really enjoy it. I mean, again, we do make some money off of it. We're not getting rich off it.
Not if it's taken you 4
No,
years.
no, definitely not. But yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. We meet a lot of really interesting people. We travel to a lot of interesting places.
Now, how do you come up with these ideas? I mean, did you just think, oh, let's just highlight 3 really good
conservationists? Yeah,
conservationists.
Yep.
Is that what you decided to do? And then,
well, with that,
and then it was like, well, who do we do? And you start asking around. Or?
So with the video we did prior to that, the video before that was a video on shorebirds called Epic Journeys.
Okay.
And a very good friend of mine is a gentleman by the name of Wayne Peterson, who works for the Massachusetts Audubon Society. He's an ornithologist, and I've known Wayne for many years. He's kind of my mentor in many ways. And Wayne quite often will consult with Jim and I have dinner with Wayne, talk to him periodically and so forth, and we'll kind of bounce ideas off of him and so forth. So when we did the shorebird video, it was a similar kind of concept in a way. We picked 3 bird species, not the individuals, just the species of birds.
Okay.
And so Wayne helped us kind of figure out, because we had a whole idea of which birds we wanted to do, and he helped narrow it down. We did red knots and talked about them in their northward migration in the spring. Went down to Delaware Bay in New Jersey and documented that and interviewed people down there. Then we did piping plovers nesting in Massachusetts, in Plymouth, and kind of talked about a nesting species and kind of that whole story of what's going on with birds nesting in close proximity to humans, in this case the piping plover. And then we did semi-palmated sandpipers, then went up to Canada, to the Bay of Fundy, to a place called Johnson's Mills, which is in New Brunswick, and talked about those birds as they migrate south in late summer, but in fall and so forth. So with that concept of 3 species of birds, we went to the next project. To your question, we said, who are the people we like to...
3 species of humans.
Exactly. So when Jim and I sat down with Wayne, I already had an idea of some of the people.
Yeah.
And we compiled a list of all these people. And for us, one of the things was geographically, we wanted something that made a little sense. We had a little more access to these people.
Right.
In Norman, he's the sanctuary director there. He's a good friend of mine as well. His office is 10 minutes from my house. That was an easy one.
Yeah,
and his story is very compelling. And oh, by the way, not only do we want compelling individuals, we wanted a compelling bird.
Okay.
Right? Snowy owls, very compelling. Puffins, very compelling.
Very.
Kestrels, another thing, compelling bird.
Yeah.
And all of the individuals, even though I didn't really know Dr. Kress that well, I'd only met him a couple times before, I had seen him speak, I'd read books about him and articles. I knew
he was the right guy.
he was the right pick, and he had a really compelling story. There's almost no story as compelling as the Atlantic puffin almost maybe anywhere in North America, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
So it just all kind of came together. Yeah, it was great.
Now, how different is it to do video footage of birds as opposed to still photography? I mean, is it really different, or?
It's different in some ways, and it's the same in others, if that makes sense. So
can you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm still using the same equipment, basically,
Okay.
in terms of my camera. I'm shooting on a Canon 1DX Mark II now. I have two bodies. That prior to that, it was a 1DX. Those cameras shoot very good video.
Okay.
Even the two models before that shot pretty good video as well. The tripod in that part of the setup is a little bit different. A lot of the wildlife photographers that are shooting, birds and other wildlife are typically using some sort of a gimbal head, usually a Wimberley, which I have one of those as well. But for video, that doesn't work so well, because with video, in some cases, you need to be able to pan and move and tilt with the bird, and on those gimbal type heads, it's not fluid enough. It's not smooth enough. So you need a video head. You need a fluid head. So I have this big fluid head. Then I also have what's called a sled that was custom made that mounts on the head of the tripod.
Okay.
And instead of supporting the camera just on the foot of the telephoto lens, there's a support at the front of the lens, the foot, and back on the camera. So there's 3 points of contact, which makes it very stable.
Okay.
And then as you pan, move, and tilt with the camera, you don't have any of that shake. The downside of all of that, however, is when you're trying to capture the audio. Because almost anywhere in the eastern part of the United States, getting the video is only one part of it. Many times you actually want what I call good or quality audio to go along with it. So I have a shotgun mic with a big windscreen and so on. It's a whole other thing that it mounts to the rig. But you can't be around other photographers.
Yeah, because they never shut up.
Well, that is one. And the other is they're taking their pictures, and you don't want to hear the click, 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 click showing up on your audio track.
So it's lonely.
It can be, but it can also be
Peaceful.
Exactly. So you don't always need the audio, but when you do need the audio,
you need to be alone.
I need to be alone and quiet. Or the other part of it, I guess, is that. And now we'll see if this plays out when you go into the field next time. Go to some place where you think you're in a very remote and wild place, and just wait and see if you can hear any man-made subjects or man-made objects. Airplanes overhead, a lawnmower in a distance, a leaf blower in a distance, a dog barking. Don't think about that.
Yeah.
I don't want that on there because that's not a natural sound. Okay. Cars, motorcycles. Motorcycle sounds travels a long distance. So even when I go up, I try to get out to places really early in the morning because there's less noise then. It's really difficult to not have that influence, that man-made sound at some point coming into play. So I've become, we just heard it outside right now, right here, we're sitting in here and you hear some of these sounds out there, right? So that's the difficult part. So I will find myself in locations where when I'm recording the subject, I'm constantly listening. It's like, I don't hear any man-made sounds, I'm going to record now. And the second I hear that plane in the distance, I have to hit stop if there's something not really happening that I want to record, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question completely or not.
That was good. No, because you have a lot more to think about with video.
Yes.
You have to have a different tripod. You have to have them, and the audio is a big deal.
You have to have a good microphone, and you have to have a good windscreen for this microphone. It's a huge shotgun mic. So when you point that mic, even if the subject is at a distance, it could be 30, 40, 50 feet away or more. When that subject is far enough away, that microphone can still pick up if the bird is calling.
And those things are not cheap.
Nothing in photography is cheap. Even the smallest object you got to buy, it's not cheap, right? There's no getting around that.
Now, as far as shooting and composition, everything is pretty similar, or you have a slower shutter speed, or do they?
Sometimes,
with video, you can change what? You can change the ISO.
You can pretty much do everything you can.
Okay.
I would say this in terms of shooting the video, because I have had this question asked a few times. I will find myself many times in a situation where I will be there to maybe photograph something, and I'll look at what's going on with whatever the subject is, and it will just strike me that there may not really be a good photo there, but there might be some good video, because there might be something going on with the bird. Yeah, with the bird preening or whatever. And not that you can't get a good photo of that, but that when you roll the video and you see the whole sequence, it makes more sense to the viewer than just the single shot.
I get it.
Right. So
you.
So I just assess and decide. I mean, many times I'm going out. I specifically I have to shoot this video
Because you need it for the documentary
or whatever. Right.
Or whatever.
And in some cases I'm going out. It's like I'm going out to photograph, and if there's some video to be had, I'll shoot it.
Okay.
In the spring when you have some of these birds that are on territory, these males, and they're singing to attract a mate, that's interesting. That's compelling, right? They make for good photos. They also make for really good video. And so I can go to a place like just west of Boston, Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge in Concord, and there's a bird called a marsh wren, and they'll climb up on these cattails and they'll sing. And again, I've captured really just fabulous photos of them singing, but when you capture the video and you can have the video to show somebody who's never seen a marsh wren, they understand it much more when they see the video than when they see the photo.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And
the settings, again, are just similar or the same, or you have to have a much slower shutter speed even though you've got a long lens, right?
No, not necessarily. It depends on how much light you have, and so if I'll adjust the ISO to accommodate what I think the lighting conditions are. The nice thing about the video is if I have a lot lower light, I can still crank that ISO up a little bit. I can roll that video because I'm going to have that slower shutter speed and I'm not worried about losing the movement, that sort of thing. Yeah. But the audio is the thing that's the real.
And you capture the audio in camera.
I actually capture. A lot of videographers are using DSLRs. We'll use a separate recorder, and I've done that too. The problem is I just don't like the whole process of having to go back and match it up. Not that it's that big a deal, but it's just easier. I've already got enough stuff I got to take into the field.
And it sounds good.
And I think it's, for what I'm using, I think it sounds fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it sounds fine.
Wow. Yeah. Now, how do you use these videos in conservation efforts? How does it help? Or photography, how does this help?
Well, in terms of conservation, I'll tell you that, there's been, whether it's Massachusetts Audubon has been looking for some of the footage to be used, or in the case of, I recently started within the last, several years or more now, using GoPro cameras for documenting birds with video. And I don't see a lot of people doing that. And I did a lot with shorebirds.
Okay.
And the folks at the National Aquarium outside of, I guess it's Baltimore, were putting together a video on birds along the seashore, and had seen some of my footage and purchased a bunch of that for this display that they were doing.
Oh, wow.
Because it's, a GoPro camera, and again, I don't see a lot of photographers using GoPros. I think a lot of photographers have them, but I don't see a lot of using them.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it has a real niche and has a real, there are certain areas where you can use it, and you can use it well, but you have to be patient and so on and so forth. And with some of the shorebird stuff I was shooting, I learned very quickly, well, I shouldn't say quickly, I learned quickly enough how to use it and get some very good quality footage. And in some areas where it just didn't work well, and I'll just give you the example, when I first started using it, and I was on Plymouth Beach, I was migrating shorebirds probably early to mid-August, and thousands of shorebirds, and I wanted to get this footage eye level down on the ground where the birds were feeding, and I placed the GoPro on the ground, and remotely with your iPhone, there's an app, you can, at a distance, see what the camera sees and then hit record when the birds get close enough.
Oh, nice.
But, this is going to be easy. What I didn't realize was the birds would get so close to the camera, and even though it's an inanimate object, and I thought it would be no difference than a Pepsi can on the ground or whatever, right? The birds would not approach, they would get so close, they would freak out, they would see it, and they would run away from it.
Oh.
So I started covering it in seaweed. And the only thing that was showing was just the lens, which they didn't pay attention. And so now the birds were coming right up to the camera, and in some cases they were pecking on the seaweed on the camera. And so I've got this footage of these birds feeding, all very natural, doing what they do. And it's footage that nobody else was really, I couldn't find anybody else was doing anything like it.
That's amazing. Yeah. Now, okay, so you just put it on the sand?
Well, yeah, there's a waterproof housing for them. Yeah, just place it right on the, yep.
Not even on a tripod or anything?
No, there's a little stand that it comes with, so it would be sitting about that high off the ground.
And that's what, 3 inches?
Yep.
Okay.
And just sitting right there, and the birds would be coming right up to it, yeah. It's very
Wow,
cool.
that is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So you've done that on the shorebirds.
Yep.
You put the
The GoPro
GoPros inside of
the Kestrel box. We did that as well.
wow.
Yeah. We've been finding little areas. Did some stuff with some swallows. Another one of the Audubon sanctuaries in Marshfield, Daniel Webster Wildlife Sanctuary, my favorite sanctuary that I spend more time than any other sanctuary
Okay.
photographing. They have barn swallows that nest in these huge observation blinds on either end of this small pond.
Okay.
You can walk in. Nice thing about it is even if it's raining, you can sit in there and see and watch what's going on and photograph the birds and whatever. And these barn swallows nest inside the blind. They're right above your head. In some cases, they're out underneath the eaves. And the other swallow is a tree swallow, which nests in these boxes, kind of out in the fields and so on and so forth. Is that I wanted to place a GoPro camera where I thought I could get footage of barn swallow and tree swallow because they would come to these certain perches. So I placed the camera, and I noticed that the barn swallows would go nowhere near it.
Okay.
They would not go near it. The tree swallows could care less. They would, in fact, I have a photo of a female sitting on top of the GoPro camera. Same family of birds, they're both swallows. One wanted nothing to do with it, the other could care less.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Wow.
I'm trying to find more ways to use GoPro cameras because I think there's a real, I think there's an untapped kind of little area there, or niche, to get some very interesting. I actually did a whole thing up at Myakka River State Park last year when I was down. I was placing it near the weir, and I actually have it on my YouTube channel. People can say I have limpkins coming right up to the camera and actually pecking at the camera,
Oh my
and all these other birds walking
gosh.
right in front of it and so forth. And yeah, it's very cool stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about the app. So there's an app that you can just turn it on and off, and you can
Yeah, you
see
can download your phone
everything.
and you can just remotely
GoPros
trigger.
are so cool, aren't
They're
they?
cool. They can be frustrating, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Very frustrating. And the other thing about the GoPros is there's not a very good audio component to it,
Oh, right.
particularly if it's
yeah.
windy. So I'm still been playing around with some different ideas and external mics, and there's a whole thing with this interference on the app, and so it's not as much a slam dunk as a lot of people think, but I think there's a lot of potential there.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's fun.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a very unique way to capture birds or whatever.
Well,
I
yep,
mean,
sure.
you know, it's funny because I recently worked a wedding. I don't do a whole lot of weddings anymore, but did a wedding, and the videographer it was a very small church.
Yep.
And she was talking. She says, "Well, I have 4 cameras." I thought, "Oh crap! How am I going to get around all the
Right,
videographer's
sure.
cameras?" But 2 of them were GoPros.
There you go.
And one of them was up at the, like on a little ledge above at the end of the aisle, and the other one was on the altar, but it was so small
Yep.
that it just wasn't obtrusive at all.
They're again, it's like any of the other tools as photographers that we use, right? You know, I often tell people in the workshops that I teach for Massachusetts Audubon, there's a sledgehammer and there's a roofing hammer. They're both hammers, but they do very different things,
Yeah.
right? So it's the same thing with any of the tools as photographers. We're always looking for the right tool to do the right job for the type of photography that we're going to do.
Yeah. Now, did you start off with just still photography, or did you start off with video, or did you just kind of start out with both?
No, I go back
You
to...
started as a birder.
Yeah, I go back to the film days. So I was shooting, slide film back in the day, and I was, just dabbling in a little bit of whatever. When I kind of decided to kind of more get into birds, wildlife, I shouldn't always say birds because it is wildlife, as I do macro photography and any subject and so forth, and not just birds, mammals. I'm going to Tanzania in a couple weeks. I'm going back to Tanzania. I was there a couple years ago.
Wow.
So anything
exciting.
in wildlife, I enjoy photographing. I enjoy the natural world, So yeah, just as the interest again kind of grew, it was just a matter of buying your first camera, and then buying your first lens, and then realizing I want a better lens, and then you know how it is.
I need another. It's funny because I told you these people. I had to talk to 2 people today who needed to buy a camera, and one guy I was like, he's like, "Well, how expensive is it?" And I said, "Photography is not an inexpensive habit." He goes, "Well, once you buy the camera, aren't you kind of all set?"
Don't we wish?
Oh, sorry, I hit my mic, but no, I just you can't laugh at people. That's
No,
rude,
I get
but,
it. Yeah.
But I tried to explain to him, and he just didn't get it. But he will. If he gets into it, he'll get it.
I've been teaching these workshops for Massachusetts Audubon for a number of years. And the workshops that I teach, and I teach with a buddy of mine, Eric Smith, Mike Militia, and I think Mike's going to be. Well, I think Mike's going to be actually giving a talk for the folks I just gave the talk to later this year. Yeah, the Camera Club there. One of the things that I noticed in the workshops we teach is that, particularly Eric and I from Massachusetts Audubon, we let people use our equipment that show up for our workshops.
Okay.
Because most people don't own a 600 millimeter lens, so
Right.
you get a chance to use a 600 millimeter lens and use one of the pro bodies or a 100 or 400, whatever it is that we have. And inevitably, we'll have, it seems like almost always one or two, in some cases more, people that they finish the workshop and they really got the bug. We taught our field school for Wellfleet Bay Sanctuary in the Cape last summer, and 3 of the participants went out and bought big telephoto lenses. One guy bought a 500 and 2 guys bought a 600 each. So, and I'm not getting any kickback from Canon, right? So, yeah, right.
Yeah, send them to Hunts.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely, yep. So,
and you got Hunts right there.
I use Gary, I've known for many years, and the folks at Hunts Photo have been great to me. I buy all my camera equipment comes from Hunts Photography. I just bought another 1DX Mark II from them just before I came down here a few weeks ago. So yeah,
well, they got the
they're
best
good people.
service. I think
Yep.
anybody who, and here we're doing a little commercial for Hunts Photo
That's
and
all right,
video
sure,
now,
yeah.
but I think especially for like the level of photographers, we have all levels. We have beginners
Sure.
to advanced, but most of them start as beginners
Absolutely,
with
yeah.
us.
I did. Everybody did.
And they need help.
They need help, absolutely.
And like one of the guys I talked to today said, well, can I just stop by and you can help me? And I said, you know what, I'm so sorry, but I need to charge you if you stop. You can't
Right.
just stop by and talk
Right.
to me. But I said,
Right.
if you call Hunts, they'll
They'll
help
help,
you.
absolutely.
And
Yep.
they won't steer you wrong.
Yep.
They'll tell you what you need to buy.
The nice thing for me with Hunts is where my office is. I'm not too far from Harvard Stadium, which is right next to Harvard Square. They have a store in Harvard Square.
Okay.
And so I don't have to go all the way up to the Melrose, to the main store. I can order whatever I want. They deliver it to the Harvard Square store. I run into Harvard Square, park my car, have lunch, grab whatever I want, and go back to the office. So it works out great for me.
But they'll ship for those
Then they
of
will
us who
ship.
don't
That's
live
right.
anywhere
That's
near
right.
there.
But you're right. Great. And look, it's all about service, right? And
how many
they do a
places
great job.
can you call and say, hey, I don't understand,
Yep.
I tried to put this lens on here and
Yep.
it's not clicking or
Nope,
whatever.
they do a great
they'll
job.
walk you right
They do a
through all
great
that
job.
kind of
Yep.
stuff. So, I mean, I don't mean to be the meanie saying that I have to charge, but I can't just sit and give free advice
yeah,
for
you'd have a line out the
24
door.
hours,
That's right. Yep, absolutely.
I gotta
Your
work.
time is
I
valuable.
need money.
Yep. Yep.
I need money to live. So how else do you use your bird images and video? Are you pretty much all Audubon, or do you work with other conservation
No,
groups,
I
or
actually.
do you sell your work?
Yeah, so I do sell my work. I think any photographer at a certain point sells their work. I don't really sell a lot of my images. That's not kind of my thing that I concentrate on
Right.
so much, although I do. We were talking about it earlier, that the photo that I've actually sold more than any other photo and have made the most money on it, and it's a lot of money at this point, is actually not of a bird, it's of a white-footed mouse.
Really?
Yes, a white-footed. It's
No.
a long story, which we're not going to tell here because it would take too long to tell the story. But precise to say is that, and I just sold it about a month ago. Again, I'll get emails periodically. It's been published in Science Magazine a couple times. It's on the Harvard
Oh my God.
University website for something in the mammal
People want
department.
a picture of a mouse, huh?
But there's a reason they want the footage of it, and it's always the same photo and so forth. So yeah.
Now, would you share that in the show notes?
Oh, sure,
or
absolutely, yeah.
Maybe we can help you sell some more of
Yeah,
those.
sure. Yeah. It's almost all for textbooks, typically, this particular
okay.
photo, yeah.
Okay.
So even though a lot of people
now, there's
don't-
a market I would have never thought of.
there's a market for everything.
So you're selling photographs for textbooks, for school
No, no.
textbooks.
One photo, just this white-footed mouse. Only this one photo.
But that's a market.
Yes.
Textbooks.
Yes,
People who write textbooks need
that's right.
photos.
And the publishers who are working on these have a need for specific photos, and for whatever reason, I guess when they need a white-footed mouse, I have become
You're
the
the only
default guy.
white-footed mouse guy out there.
So, go figure.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
oh my
yeah.
gosh, that
Yep.
is so interesting.
Yep.
All right, so if we're going to stay on the theme of conservation,
Yes.
what can we do as just regular photographers to help? I mean, because I think
Yeah.
what happens to us as nature photographers as we start getting into it, and we get into nature and we're like, oh my gosh, you know, they're building they're tearing down more acres of the Everglades to build more houses. What can we do?
Well, I think, you know, progress is inevitable, right? I mean, I've been coming to Florida for 30 years, and if I think about the area in and around Englewood and Sarasota and Venice area and so forth, where I spend time when I come down here mostly, you know, there's huge areas there that were cow fields when I first came, and they're all, you know, the developments that you see all over Florida. And look, I get it. People love to come to Florida and want to be here, right?
We did.
Right, exactly. I mean, people are, you know, the whole saying they're loving it to death, right? The natural world needs people to want to protect it. And there are areas that are protected. And this is just my opinion, and people can beg to differ, and people do differ in their opinions. But I think for someone like myself who would like to see conservation taken seriously or more seriously by more people, I just think the understanding that wildlife needs space.
Okay.
There's no getting around that. There's no substitute for wild places for wild animals. That includes birds. They are wild animals. And while I think Florida in general does a decent enough job in protecting pieces of land, Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, which is the Audubon Sanctuary, Mayaca River State Park, which I mentioned earlier.
Which is surrounds the Audubon
Right.
Sanctuary.
So a lot of that. But when you look as a whole, I think the issue is that wildlife is being squeezed from all areas, all sides.
Right.
And again, if I just think back to the last 30 years that I've been coming here and how much land has been developed that I've seen in just one area, right? That land is now developed basically forever.
Right.
And so the wildlife that occupied that space now does not have that space.
Okay.
Florida scrub jays are a great example. Florida scrub jay numbers, and not that I know really the hard numbers on it, but I know enough to know that Florida scrub jay numbers are in serious decline because their habitat was being removed and continues to be removed.
Okay.
So back to your question, what can people do? I think that what people can do is first and foremost is have an understanding of this is what's going on.
Okay.
And for as much as, again, I understand progress is what it is. Developers are going to develop. That's what they do. Where is there some sort of happy medium where people can support initiatives, support whether it's land trust organizations, the Audubon groups, state and county government, municipalities and so forth, to say we want to protect pieces of land.
Okay.
The protection of land is really the biggest thing, I think.
Okay.
In my mind anyway. And I think you would find with a lot of other people, look, I'm not a biologist, okay, but if you talk to biologists and people that are land conservationists and so forth, that are real experts on it, that's what they're going to tell you.
They need the land.
You know, you have to have the land. And no disrespect to the developers don't want to hear that because they're in the business of developing land for whatever their project is. I get it, that's what they do. But there has to be some sort of, you know, middle ground there.
So we need to protect the land. So how, as photographers, what can we do? I mean,
well,
Joe and I donated a lot of pictures to the Audubon of the Western Everglades.
Sure, that's great.
Helps them.
You know, becoming members of these organizations, supporting any initiatives that come up, if there's any ballot initiatives and that sort of thing. You know, government officials that are running for office, that part of their platform is that they want to work to protect land as opposed to someone who doesn't want to do that. Again, I don't want to get too political with things.
No, I don't want to get too political. I'm thinking as far as photographers, though.
Well, that's what you can do. You can help support those people, help support those organizations, become members of those organizations. I'll give you another example. We'll just talk about, I'll mention Hawk Mountain Sanctuary in Pennsylvania, which I've been visiting for many years. I just gave a program there in September. They've been doing work there in terms of raptor conservation longer than any other organization. You know, if you're somebody who you really are interested and care about just birds of prey, support an organization like Hawk Mountain. they're doing really great work, not just there in Pennsylvania, but all over the world in terms of raptor conservation. You know, so I mean, you could pick out any number of organizations that are working to protect wildlife all over, not all over the state, all over the country, but all over the world. And so as photographers, if you help support these organizations, you in turn are helping to support the wildlife.
And you know, for me, who's got the marketing brain all the time, charitable marketing is a very good way to, you know, you're helping a cause, but
Yep.
you're also getting your name out there.
Sure.
Now that, and I'm also one of these people who's opposed to doing something for photo credit or something like that in general. Where, oh, for exposure. That was the word I was
when I get
looking for.
contacts for those type of things,
Oh,
I
you'll
don't
get
know,
exposure.
I got enough exposure,
yeah.
right?
But if it's a mission that you're near and dear
Yes.
to,
Yes.
and you are out there taking those pictures,
Yeah.
it will help you get your name out
Yeah.
to have your picture hanging up at the
Yeah.
Everglades National
Sure.
Park.
Absolutely.
You know,
Well,
visitors.
I'll just go back
you
to
know?
the folks at Hawk Mountain. Again, I've been a member of Hawk Mountain Sanctuary for many years. I go there almost every year and spend some time on the North Lookout, you know, looking down the North Ridge and as the birds are migrating and so forth. I know some of the people there. I know some of the biologists that work there and so forth. I've got this nice rapport with them and so forth. If they contact me and say, like, well, Lori Goodrich is one of the biologists. She's a great person. She's a friend. I've known her for many years. If she sends me an email and says, Shawn, I'm doing a story or an article on whatever, she knows I have photos, I'm not going to charge her for the photos. I'm going because I want to help support that cause, that conservation group, right?
Right.
And then to your point, yes, then people see, oh, this guy, Shawn Carey, wow, look what he's doing.
Well, and it's led to speaking engagements
Absolutely.
for you and a
Absolutely.
teaching job where you get paid.
That's right.
So
exactly.
it has
exactly.
helped your career.
Yes.
But it's also helped.
Yes. Well, look, I think, look, you know, it's all about, in many cases, making good connections.
Being a good person
and
with
going
those
a good
connections.
Exactly. Being a good person. I try to be friendly. You know, when I'm down here for my 4 weeks, my getaway, my 4 weeks.
4 weeks in Florida.
Yep. I go the last 2 weeks of December, the first 2 weeks of January. I do the Christmas bird count at Myakka River State Park.
So what does that mean? You go up and down and count the birds?
So yeah, all over the country and in Florida this time of year, they have a specific date at the different locations. And for Myakka, it's always that Monday before Christmas.
Okay.
And so within Myakka, they divide it up into different areas and different groups go out and count all the birds they see. So the group that I do it with, we start at one location, we end at another. We do the same route every year. So hopefully your data, you can track your data year after year to see the numbers of the birds, right?
Well,
and then when I'm finished, I volunteer in the afternoon at the bird walk and answer questions for people and bring my spotting scope and a pair of binoculars. And then every Monday afterwards, I do 4 Mondays. So in 2 days from now, I'll be there at the bird walk. And I'll be there from about 10:30 in the morning till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's my therapy. I sit there, I have my lunch, I have my spotting scope, my binoculars, my field guide. People from all over the country and all over the world show up in Florida this time of year. And they show up and they say, hey, what are we seeing? And I point things out and say, you can use my spotting scope. Here's a pair of binoculars. Here's the field guide. Answer questions. And so I volunteer. And I think you have to give back, and I enjoy it. And then, you know, when things come up where, you know, I'm asked to, whether it's a camera club or a birding festival or whatever, and they want me to come and speak, then they're going to pay you for those services.
That's awesome.
Because you have to make a little bit to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And it's so funny you said that because I walk every morning with a friend of mine, and we mostly walk around her little neighborhood. But on the weekends, we walk on the beach. And I think it was on Christmas that
Well, it's not always on Christmas, but it can be.
It might have been on Christmas, though, because she has a real job, so she has to go, you know, so it probably was on Christmas. And we see this lady with all this, I'm like, what are you doing? She said, I'm counting the birds.
There you go.
Isn't that funny? And I never heard of that until then, and
Christmas
now here
bird
you
count.
are a few weeks later. By the way, audience, if we're looking a little shiny, my air conditioner is broken, and it's January, but it's still very hot. And I'm starting to melt a little bit. You look like you might be melting a
little
bit
bit. Well, we're good. We're good.
Oh, my goodness. Anyway, but that's fascinating. And what else do you have? Any tips to give us to wrap us up?
Tips. I guess just in photography in general, I always tell people just do what you really love doing in terms of your photography. Don't force it. You know.
But sometimes you don't know what you love doing until you get out and experience.
No, I understand, but I think at a certain point, when you get out to photograph whatever it is you like to photograph, it becomes apparent to people pretty quickly. I like doing X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah.
And when you find whatever it is you really enjoy photographing, and that's where your passion is, if you're really passionate about it, you're going to do it, and you're going to do it well because you really have an interest. In terms of the nature, bird, wildlife photography, you have to be a patient person. I always tell people, if you're going to be a bird or a wildlife photographer and you're not a patient individual, go take up golf or something.
Landscape photography.
Well, yeah, because
I'm not a patient person.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just think
I'm not good at the patience thing.
follow your passion.
But I love landscape photography.
Yeah. I don't do a lot of it.
Cityscapes and I do dabble with the birds, but I'm not good at it because I don't do it often enough.
I was telling Joe, I was admiring your photography here in terms of
in the bathroom with the maternity
and
the babies.
Because here's the thing, I can appreciate what I consider to be great photography, no matter what it is. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is real. Absolutely. I don't care what it is, And I saw it, and I was just like, wow, this is really good, right? Because you're passionate about it.
Well, I was. I have to admit, though, when the money went away for newborn photography, my passion left with it.
Yeah, but at the time you were, right?
Oh my gosh, that was my living, was baby
and it shows in your photography.
I loved it.
I have a friend of mine.
But it got tough when there was no money left.
I have a friend of mine in Massachusetts who's a macro specialist, and within macro photography, he specializes in spiders.
Ooh.
And he travels all over the world photographing spiders. His name is Joe Warfel, by the way.
Well, maybe I'll have him on the show sometime.
Yeah, he's a really, really cool guy. He's
a spider guy. I'm sure he'll be in Florida.
He's a machinist for living.
Because you know what we have in Florida? Lots of spiders.
Lots of spiders. and
big ones.
And you see his macro photography and you go, wow, this guy's really good. And I dabble in macro photography. I'm nowhere near, not like that.
I know. So. Some people are amazing, amazing at what they do.
Or some of the people now that are into the whole night photography. My friend Dr. Carl is into this night photography, and he's traveled to Iceland 3 times now to do the Northern Lights, and he's doing all this amazing night photography. And I've done a little bit with them, but again,
people that are really hard.
And the people that are really good at it, and my buddy Dr. Carl is really good at it, boy, it's some really stunning stuff.
You have to follow Rob Hoovis. He's a local guy, lives in Fort Myers, and he was on the show about night photography, I'm pretty sure is what we talked about, because I just found him on Instagram, and he's actually going to be back on the show talking about how to build an Instagram following, because he's done so well on Instagram.
These night photographers are really good.
He's really good, and he does it all locally, which is nice, because you do see a lot of these people, and they go out to all these remote places. Most of us can't travel that often or that much. He does everything locally. He has light pollution. He has all this, but it still comes out amazing.
I do a fair amount of traveling, but the vast majority of my photography is within about 60 miles of where I live.
And that's what I think you need to. You need to love where you are.
Yeah, find your little spot.
You have to. Of course, some of us are lucky to live like in paradise, but Anyway, all right. So is that your big tip of the day?
Sure. Yes,
photograph your passion. Find it and photograph it.
Absolutely.
And I like that.
Yes.
It is a good thing. A good thing. Thank you, Shawn, for being on the Understand Photography Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm Peggy Farron. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, we will put the show notes on understandphotography.com, and please leave us a review on iTunes. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next week.